All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Thomas Schulte. I'm the chair of ASQ Section 0914 here in Lafayette, Indiana. I want to welcome all of you to the meeting. Looking at my clock here, we've got just a minute or so to go. We're going to give everybody just another 1 or 2 minutes to kind of get into the meeting and get logged in here, and then we're going to start talking. So bear with us, and we'll get started here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got 6:31, so time for us to get going. My name is Thomas Schulte. Once again, I'm the chair of ASQ Section 0914 here in Lafayette, Indiana. We're going to get rolling right into some information on ASQ National, and then we've got a great presentation coming in tonight. So just so all of you are aware of what's going on, everybody knows that this whole COVID disease and the coronavirus has kind of put a stop to a lot of in-person meetings. That's why we're doing this virtual. We're going to keep doing that all the way through the end of August at this point. ASQ National has declared no in-person meetings until the 1st of September. So we're going to keep that up for now. This is our last meeting for a couple of months anyway. We normally take a break in our section through the summer months, so that works out pretty well for us. We would like to come back in August with another virtual meeting. And I want to point out to you that the great thing about doing this as a virtual meeting is it makes it very easy for us to recruit speakers from anywhere. We're not restricted to speakers who can drive to our location at this point. We can get speakers from anywhere in the world we want to get them from. So if you can think of a good speaker, if you can think of somebody that you would like to hear present something, or that would be a great speaker for us, just for others to hear, please forward that information to us. Let us know that that's somebody that we want to have speak to us. We'll try to get a hold of that person to get them scheduled to speak in August. For that matter, moving forward, if this seems to be a better way for us to meet instead of in person and do more of a virtual meeting, it's an option for us moving forward. Maybe we can do this more often just to get some of those other speakers that are not in our immediate area. So if you've got somebody that you want to see moving forward, just let us know, and we'll try to make sure we can reach out to them and make that happen. Something else that you need to be aware of from ASQ National, it's been a couple weeks ago now, was the World Conference on Quality Improvement, the virtual version. First time ever that conference has been done virtually, and seems to have been a good success. If you missed the conference, if you weren't able to hear some of those presentations, you still have the option to get on the website, myasq.com or myasq.org. Sorry, I want to make sure that's right, myasq.org. And you can download those, or you can buy the opportunity to download some of those and to view some of those. $99 for a year's access, so that you can get to some of those presentations from that conference if you were not able to see them during the week that they were for free. MyASQ.org is just a great resource anyway. Take time, go there, take a look at it, see what you can find there. There's good information there about National ASQ, things happening, good resources, good conversations happening in the chat rooms that are set up there. Take time to go look at it. You'll be surprised by how much has been added there. I think that's all I've got. With that, I'm going to introduce Deondra Wardelle. She's going to be our speaker this evening, and I'll let her tell you all about herself. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Thomas, and good to see you, Scott. So I'm excited to be with you this evening, ASQ Lafayette. Thank you for having me this evening. So my name is Deondra Wardelle. I currently am the Vice President of Human Resources and Continuous Improvement Science at the American College of Sports Medicine. In my immediate past professional life, I worked for Westrock Incorporated, which is a packaging company, and I was the Global Director of Performance Excellence for the MPS division. I had about 70 sites in North America, Europe, and Asia, and I had multiple black belts and other practitioners who reported to me, and we use continuous improvement to make our processes better and help to satisfy our customers. I also have a background in retail and banking, and I've done a little bit of everything. But I'm glad to be with you tonight. And just one moment, let me see if I'm able to share my screen. Okay, so Thomas, I need a little help from you. It says that I'm not able to share my screen.
Try that again, ma'am. I think I've got you fixed.
Okay, I'm good now. Thank you.
My apologies.
No apologies at all. Okay. If that's the worst of the technical difficulties we'll have tonight, we're doing great. Okay. So, like I said, I have a diverse background in various industries and sectors, from operations to healthcare, retail, IT, purchasing, human resources, training and development, marketing, sales, you name it. But the common theme and the common goal with everything that I do ties back to what we're going to talk about tonight. That's A3 thinking. My passion is developing people and helping people to improve processes. So the presentation is the evolution of A3 thinking. So today's topics and targets and what I'm hoping that you'll have as a takeaway, what I like to do is kind of begin with the end in mind. You know, once I get to the end of these few slides, you know, something new that you'll have in your toolkit is, one, to have a better understanding what A3 thinking is, its definition. So to clarify what is meant by A3 thinking and how it cultivates a continuous improvement mindset and how it supports PDCA management, okay? Another takeaway is to better understand the Toyota production system and the 7 elements of A3 thinking, the history of the use of A3 reports at Toyota, and how A3 reports and A3 thinking promote TPS, or what is now called the Toyota way. Third takeaway is the application of A3s, and discuss how A3 thinking and the A3 reports is not only for manufacturing. So we're going to talk about that. And then my ultimate goal that I'm hoping that you will help me with as a takeaway is join me in my quest. I have this big, lofty goal to create a world of problem solvers, and to create that world of problem solvers by developing A3 thinkers. Okay, so considering that this is virtual, you know, I'm accustomed to being in a room and bebopping around and interacting with everyone. So what I'm hoping to accomplish during this presentation is that it's mutually beneficial, that it's beneficial to both of us, that you learn from me, that I learn from you, and that we have some interaction. So we're going to get an opportunity to interact right here, and Thomas is going to help me with this activity. So what it is, I'll need 3 volunteers, okay? And don't everyone jump at once, but I'll need 3 volunteers. And let me tell you how I'll need you to help me in making this more interactive. I have 3 inquiries, and I have them numbered. So I'm going to read them to you in a bit. When I read the inquiry, I need a volunteer to respond in the chat box And what I need you to add is what number, what inquiry you'd like to respond to, and your name. And when we get to the point of where I want to revisit and address these different inquiries, then Thomas will take you off mute, and then you'll share with the team some of your experiences, okay? So inquiry number 1, who completes the majority of A3s within your organization? So if you would like to respond to this inquiry, place a 1 and your name, and when the time comes, we'll call on you to share who completes the majority of the A3s in your organization, okay? Inquiry number 2. What I'd like for you to do is share a success and a challenge you've experienced with completing the A3 reports, okay? So if you would like to respond to inquiry number 2, you would just put 2 in the chat box and your name, and I just need you to share a success and a challenge you've experienced with completing A3 reports. And then the third inquiry, and there's no wrong answer for any of these, but I'm curious to learn what comes to mind when you hear A3 thinking. So place 3 in the chat box and your name, and we'll call on you. Okay. So Thomas, do we have anyone who's volunteered for inquiry number 1? Anyone? Anyone?
Anyone? Anyone?
Not yet.
So it looks like Vicki wants to respond to inquiry number 1. So Vicki, if you're able to unmute your mic, and if you can share with us who completes the majority of the A3s in your organization.
So I'm actually started a new job, so I'm going to actually speak about that previously. Transmissions, and we've gotten to a point where a majority were actually being handled by lead operators or low-level tech personnel, so like maintenance techs, systems techs. But it was definitely a long road to get there. So it started off with a lot of the QEs, level.
Okay, Vicki, I lost you at the end, but what I think I heard you say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong by adding this information in the chat, but it's a lot of the operators, frontline workers that are completing the A3s at your organization, but that's something that didn't happen overnight. It's taken time.
That's correct.
Okay, so that is really good to hear that you have that level of involvement and engagement among your operators with the A3. So kudos to you and your organization. Okay, so I don't see anyone who has is wanting to share with inquiry number 2 a success or a challenge you've experienced with completing the A3s. So I'll share one. Okay, so one of the successes, and this is, you know, again, what just excites me so much about developing people is where people who have been historically intimidated by, you know, Lean or Lean Six Sigma or any Kaizens or improvement activity, as I've coached and worked with them on guiding them through the completion of the A3, how they see how powerful the tool is, that it's not just a report that you complete at the end, but it really helps to guide you through just that scientific thinking. A challenge that I had, you know, earlier on in my career when I first started using A3s myself, and even to a certain extent with coaching others, getting so caught up on filling out the form versus the thinking behind it. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that more later. And then my third inquiry of what comes to mind when you hear A3 thinking, I didn't hear any responses, but that's okay because we're going to talk through that here in a bit. Okay. So to get
Deondra,
into this, yes.
there was a response for number 3. It was Greg Talbert.
Okay, well, it's not too late. Greg, I'd like to hear from you.
Okay. What comes to mind when I hear A3 thinking is presenting an issue or a problem with solution in a concise and clear format with, you know, really just as much information as is needed without overdoing it, you know, without putting too much. Pictures speak louder than words, I guess.
Absolutely.
What I think of.
Okay.
Something on a one-page picture that can be quickly and accurately digested.
Greg, that is a perfect synopsis and explanation of A3 thinking. If I had not already done the work of putting these slides together, I would stop now, but I'm going to move ahead. That was a dry joke. I hope you laugh with me. But that's it exactly. That's what a lot of A3 thinking is about, and we're going to talk about that more in the upcoming slides. So thank you for sharing. So, you know, Taiichi Ohno, who is the inventor of the Toyota production system, said, the Toyota style is not to create results by working hard. It is a system that says there is no limit to people's creativity. People don't go to Toyota to work, they go there to think. So when we think about, you know, A3 thinking and just overall, you know, the A3 process in and of itself, this is not a new concept. And most people assume that Toyota is where A3 or where the PDCA methodology started. That's not the case. It's just that Toyota has mastered it. Okay. And so getting into kind of some of the foundational information about A3 thinking, and Greg, you provided a perfect synopsis of what it's about. It basically ties back into scientific thinking. And that is the connection between the A3 and the PDCA cycle. And it's the scientific thinking, not conformance to a template, that matters in completing the A3 report. So some of the components are the objective. You want to remove subjectivity and emotion by using data. You're looking at the results and the process focus. Focus on the results by making sure that we follow the correct process, that there is alignment. We want to develop agreement by involving all stakeholders and getting the key facts of the situation first. Okay, and then we want to follow a logical and effective thinking approach. I remember at an organization where I worked previously, there was a quality manager who had the task of completing A3s for any problem that arose within production. And so what he was doing, he was sitting in his office as a team of one, and he would go to the floor and get data, or he would run reports, but on his own, he was trying to complete the A3 report. And I remember when I joined the organization, he approached me and said, you know, Deondra, I'm really struggling with completing these reports. Can you help me? And as we began to talk, I asked him, I said, well, how is it that you were introduced to the A3 report? Because I was asking him about, you know, the different steps, going through plan, do, check, and act. And that did not ring a bell with him. And he said, I was just given this report and I was told to complete it. He did not have the connection between the PDCA. And so that's one of the reasons why he was struggling. I brought that up to share with you what A3 thinking is about and how Toyota promotes A3 thinking. In Toyota, they have two pillars. One is a respect for people. Two is continuously improve. And the goal is for the learning to occur, to be more focused on the learning that's embedded in completing that report and going through the PDCA cycle versus filling out a form. Now, again, Toyota has perfected A3 reporting. Just like Greg was saying earlier, you want to make sure things are visual, that they're to the point. And so the form helps you with that. It's called an A3 because it's built on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, okay? In more recent years, Toyota now uses what's called an A4, where all of that information is on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And, you know, the assumption, like I said, is that Toyota introduced PDCA. That's not the case. They perfected it. And Toyota's problem-solving approach and what has developed as TPS, or the Toyota way, was deeply influenced by Western culture. Decades ago, Toyota took what was learned from the quality guru, W. Edwards Deming, the PDCA cycle, also called the Deming cycle, and used it to rigorously teach problem solving throughout Toyota. And as a result, as of constantly practicing and making this a part of every aspect of the operation, the PDCA cycle and the use of the A3 report has been ingrained into the culture. And so that is what is meant by A3 thinking. And that is one of the reasons why Toyota has experienced the success that they have with developing their teams and continuously improving. Okay, so building upon, or what's rooted into that A3 thinking is the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, and act. Okay, also referred to as the Deming cycle. And so PDCA is the heart of the Toyota production system. It's actually the management system and methodology, not just used for solving problems, but it's how Toyota conducts their business. So PDCA is the motor in the A3 car that runs. So PDCA, again, it stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's the 4 major steps of the cycle. And then there are additional steps that are embedded in it. But what is a critical component to PDCA is go and see. Go to Gemba where the work occurs to see what happens in the workplace. And it's so important to capture data and to run reports and to track metrics, but it's also important to go see things firsthand to see how the process is actually performing in its current state. So let's step back and look at the different components of what constitutes this Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. Starting with plan. The problem solver, or the A3 thinker, should thoroughly study a problem or opportunity to understand it from its various viewpoints and many angles. And Charles Franklin Kettering, who was an American inventor, once said, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." So we have to go and see. And I like to have fun when I work with teams and we're building these A3 reports. And in the plan phase, I say, you know, we need to think of this as a crime scene. You know, CSI and Scandal, you know, some of my favorite shows. We need to think of it as a crime scene. We need to go where the issue occurred, and we want to gather as much information as possible without judgment or without prejudice, and observing and documenting what we see. So the first thing we need to do is clarify the problem. And all that means is we want to grasp the current condition, the real one, how the process is actually performing, not what a nice little manual says or what our standard work says or what we think or how we think the process should be performing. We want to understand what's really taking place. We then want to break down the problem. How is the process performing compared to the standard? Understand what that gap is, okay? And then once we understand that gap, we want to set a target or a goal to achieve to close that gap and meet the standard of performance where we expect to be operating. What's next is we want to analyze the root cause. And what I like to refer to a way to analyze the root cause, we want to get to the point where we can actually touch where the problem occurs, or we want to touch the pain point. And we do that by using root cause analysis tools such as the 5 whys and the fishbone diagram. I have worked with an organization before that were using A3 reports, but what was missing from the A3 report, believe it or not, was the root cause analysis. And what team members shared with me once we started having discussions about the importance of performing that root cause analysis, that for A3s of past, what were happening is whatever recommendations or improvements they came up with, because it wasn't tied to a root cause, it was like throwing Jell-O against the wall. It just didn't stick. And we don't want that. The last stage of the plan phase is develop countermeasures. And countermeasures is a Toyota term, but we want to visualize a future state. We want to have it so clear, so concise, so well thought out of what we want that future state to look like, so there's not any questions about it, okay? Once the plan has been established, then what good is having a plan and you don't execute? So that's where you get into the do, and that's where the action plan takes place, related to what was discovered in root cause analysis, tied to the countermeasure. And here it's important to make sure that you have the buy-in from stakeholders and those who will be impacted by the process, because you want to make sure that you have their input, that they're brought along, that they feel like they're involved, and that something isn't just happening to them. After do, we want to check. We want to look at those measurements we put in place and see how effective they were of whatever implementation or pilot we've developed. And we want to compare how are we performing against that original target that was set. Basically, we want to do follow-up. And then we want to act. Establish that new process. Make sure, you know, if what we develop works, we want it to stick. And so we want that new process to stick. We want that solution, that system, or that standard to stick, okay? And if whatever it is we plan to do, if we achieved it, great, okay? We want to make sure standardization is in place so that we can build on it. But let's say whatever it is that we had planned, we didn't get the effect, we didn't get the outcome we were expecting, no problem. You know, learning still has occurred. A problem solver has developed a new skill. And one of the beauties of this plan, do, check, act cycle, it's never ending. So even when we improve and we're successful on what it is we want to achieve, we look how we can kind of go to the next level. And if we get an outcome that we weren't expecting, still no problem. Let's go back through the cycle and look at ways to improve. So the thing about the A3 report, and this is what that quality manager that I mentioned earlier learned and began to appreciate, is that the PDCA template is embedded in the report. The left side of the A3 report is focused on plan. The right side is on the do, check, and act. And the goal, like Greg was saying earlier, is to tell the story. So anytime we can add pictures or graphics or charts or what have you to tell the story quickly, that's what we want to do. And that's how this report is used in Toyota. You know, Toyota management believes in being engaged and going to Gemba and going to the process. Well, when they get there, there are these A3 or now A4 reports, and in some instances even flip charts, where they can see the thinking of the learner and see where they are in the process. And they can ask questions so that more learning can occur and ensure that whatever solutions have been identified, that ultimately they get back to the root cause. I'm reminded whenever I see this format or this form, I'm reminded of an executive vice president that I worked with in a past life. Had a tremendous amount of respect for this individual. And of course, being an executive vice president, you are going from meeting to meeting, and there's a lot of decisions you have to make very quickly, and you need data. You don't have time to go through a 50 and 60 page report. You need succinct, clear, concise information. And so as we began our journey on continuous improvement and introducing the A3 report, I always quoted something he always said, that don't get so caught up in form that you miss the function. And that holds true with A3 thinking, A3 reports, and the whole mindset of the Toyota. Yes, there's this A3 report that guides you through the plan, do, check, act cycle, but no two A3 reports are alike. Because what you want to make sure you're focusing on is how to tell the story. So some A3 reports may have a line layout or may have part of the value stream map. Another A3 report might have a chart or a graph, but the ultimate goal is to make sure that the learning occurs and that the story is told and that there is a connection to the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. So the other part of the Toyota production system that has been a key part of Toyota's success and what, many industries and organizations and companies try to replicate, and I think sometimes, have been missed, are the components that are part of, or the elements that are part of what's called A3 thinking, and there are 7. And so those 7 are logical thinking process, the second is objectivity, the third is results and process, fourth is synthesis, distillation, and visualization, 5, alignment, 6, coherence within and consistency across, and 7 is a systems viewpoint. Let's talk about those a little deeper. Okay, so at Toyota, intellectual development is a top priority. And the A3s are used to cultivate and develop the scientific thinking. So to start out with, step 1, or element 1, the logical thinking process, is think, then act rationally in decision-making and problem solving, okay? We wanna have our attention on the right things, discern between cause and effect, and using the scientific method to do the investigation. Kind of like that crime scene I mentioned earlier. We want to collect data, we want to look at the information and not jump to conclusions or solutions. Objectivity, a central component of A3 thinking. Effective problem solvers continually test their understanding of a situation for assumptions, biases, and misconceptions. Too often in organizations or within companies, we like to play the blame game. So if there is a situation where a machine is constantly down, oh, well, let's blame it on maintenance. If there is a situation where, I don't know, membership or, something that we need marketing promote, if the numbers aren't where we want them to be, oh, well, let's blame it on marketing. But when we do a deeper dive, you may find that that machine is down, not because maintenance isn't available, but perhaps there is something in the process that was missing, or there was some key information that we need that we didn't have to make sure the machine is operating the way it should. For any of those things that we may blame marketing for, is the case that we're not clear on who the audience is that we should be marketing to. And what it comes down to is it's never about the people, it's about the process. And that's why we should remain objective and clear. Results and processes. A3 thinking says that both results and process are important. Both are necessary and critical to effective organizational improvement and personal development. At Toyota, achieving goals with sloppy processes is unacceptable. So there's no such thing as happenstance or accident. If there has been a change or if there has been improvement, there should be some data. There should be some information in that A3 report to back up and justify and explain what has happened. 4, A3 reports are brief by design and encourages the capture of most of the vital points to clearly communicate the message. So just the facts. And again, having those graphics or anything to paint the picture and help tell the story of the A3 report, that's what we should be encouraged to do. Then in alignment, there is this involvement of 3D communication. 1, we should communicate horizontally across the organization. Other groups that are affected by the change should be made aware. We need to communicate up and down. There is a hierarchy, whether it's, the frontline managers, frontline engineers, definitely members of our quality teams, up to senior leadership. We want to make sure everyone is aligned and understand what problem is being addressed and what solution is being identified. And then we want to communicate with this 3D communication back and forth across time. So we want to understand, well, what remedies have been identified in the past? What are we looking at putting in place now? And what, as a result of doing these recommendations or conducting these pilots, what will this look like in the future? And understand the complete timeline and get input along the way. Something that I always have done when working with teams and when it's time to do a Kaizen, of course, we always want to go to Gemba, but getting that input and making sure that there's buy-in and alignment is so critical. So usually wherever it is in the process of the Kaizen will take place, prior to the Kaizen event, we would post the charter and we would post a flip chart so that although people may have given us information when we were in the plan phase, something else may have come up that they want us to be aware of in that Kaizen, and we want to make sure that's captured. And then we want to go back and review that information. And again, that helps to feel like, it helps team members to feel like they're part of the process and they're part of the change and they're just not being hit with it. Okay. Next, with the coherence within and consistency across, that's simply about tackling problems that are aligned with the organization's goals to address the root cause and come up with sound implementations. You know, we want to make sure that things, whatever the problem is that we're working on, that it ties into the organization's purpose, the organization's vision, and the organization's mission. That we're not coming up with things to do just for the sake of doing them, but it's connected with the overall true north and purpose of what it is the organization is trying to accomplish. And then finally, the systems viewpoint. The problem solver should understand the situation in a broad context, and a recommendation should promote the overall good of the organization. We want balance. We want to be careful not to implement something that promotes the organizational goal for one at the expense of another. Some examples that I have seen in my life is if there's something where there's operations happening across multiple shifts, something may be put in place to kind of streamline a process for first shift without a lot of thought being given to those people who are on third shift who may not have as much management support as those on first. So work may run smoothly for first shift, but because third shift had not been taken into consideration, a bottleneck may be introduced. So we always want to make sure there's balance in what we do. Okay, so you know, when it comes to thinking about, you know, A3 thinking, A3 reports, and this whole PDCA mindset and or A3 thinking and this PDCA management style, Toyota uses A3 reports in every aspect of the business, from production to engineering, purchasing, sales, finance, even on the corporate level. And the other thing too is the A3s and this whole A3 thinking is used as a coaching tool, because as managers are working with employees, or a supervisor is working with, you know, their direct report or whomever, it's not about telling a person what to think or what they should be doing. Instead, they're coaching and asking questions because they want the person to think deeper. And it's been in my experience, I've not only used this whole A3 thinking and A3s in my professional life, I've used it in my personal life. When I relocated to Indianapolis, I did an A3 for my move. And my friends who were part of my A3 moving team, you know, they begin to learn about the A3. They now use it in their personal life. They use it in their professional life. And some of them are educators and counselors, and just they work in a number of different industries, healthcare. And you see the value that this whole A3 thinking and going through this PDCA cycle can bring. So, you know, I want to say this, no matter and this, I felt like this image really clearly expressed how A3 thinking, A3 reports, and PDCA can be used. Anywhere there are people and processes, there's a place for A3 reports and A3 thinking. And I promise you can quote me on that. So in terms of developing A3 thinkers, that's the ultimate goal. So it's 4 components to it. We want to look at logical thinking via scientific thinking. One of my good friends who is a coach and a mentor, and he works with a number of healthcare organizations and manufacturing organizations, his name is Panos Efsta. He talks about intentional curiosity. And what we want to do is we want to grow and develop. We want to create that childlike curiosity that sometimes along the way, we've sort of overlooked or missed. But as we have problems within our work, And even the small problems, we want to start engaging people to think about things differently of how can I make this process better? While focusing on the objectivity, okay? You know, placing an emphasis on getting to that root cause, not blaming others, but really want to understand why is this process operating the way it is and how can we make it perform better? Making sure we have that balance, you know, both on results and processes, because when we have balance, that helps to engage employees and it helps to have a healthy organization. And then ultimately, it all comes back to respect for people. You know, results do not come at the expense of people or processes, but it comes from cultivating and coaching others for success. So I kind of revamped the PDCA cycle with some pictures and images. And in each one, it's, you know, a learner and a coach. A learner and a coach. You know, here in this karate lesson, it's learners and coaches. Sure, there's a science teacher at the front of that room that's serving as a learner and coach. And the heart of what we need to do is we need to go, we need to see, we need to ask, we need to listen. And ultimately, we need to learn. And that's what it's about. Using this scientific method through the PDCA cycle, we want to continuously think and look for ways to improve our processes, to improve our work, and improve what we're doing in this world. So as a recap, you know, we've gone over, you know, the definition of A3 thinking. We've talked about PDCA and its managerial effectiveness, the use of the A3 report to tell the story, to get to the root cause, and to not just improve processes, but to develop people. And I hope one thing that you've taken away is that A3 thinking applies to every process for everyone and everywhere. So in closing, I want to issue a challenge to you. It's a challenge of cultivation and development for ASQ Lafayette. And here is the ask. From what we've talked about with A3 thinking as hopefully what may be a new tool for you to use, I want you to figure out how you can use this tool to coach someone on the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle and completing an A3 report. I want you to identify a learner or a new A3 thinker and someone who's perhaps maybe within your scope of responsibility who has something that's causing them pain in their process and not anything major. We want to keep this small scale. And what I mean by small scale is perhaps something that can be resolved within a few weeks, and use what you know about using the A3, what you've learned about A3 thinking, and guiding them through the PDCA cycle and working with them to learn about how the A3 can be used to improve their process, their problem, or whatever it is that's causing them pain. But remember, as you're coaching them through this, it's not about the form, it's about the function. Okay, so I've been talking for quite a bit. At this point in time, what I'd like to do is, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. And I'm not sure how the sound will work as we're coming off mute. So I think what may work best, and Thomas, this is where I'll need your help again, is if you put your questions in the chat box, and I'll be more than happy to answer. And if I don't know the answer, I'll say, I'm sorry, I don't know, but I will get back with you. Is that fair? Okay.
Sounds great, Deondra. Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. And thank you for the challenge at the end. We all need to be challenged once in a while. Folks, we're going to leave this open for a few minutes here. Please type any questions you have for Deondra into the chat box. I'll read them off for her, help her out with that. We'd love to be able to get your questions answered. And while we're waiting and pausing for some questions to get entered there, I'll apologize again for the few technical issues we've had. We're learning a little something new with every time we do this. It's only our second virtual meeting, so I appreciate your patience with us on that. And also, one other thing that I didn't mention at the beginning, we are recording this presentation, so it will be available on our section website at MyASQ just as soon as we can get it there. And you know, that takes us a day or two, but we will get it there as quickly as we can. So if you have questions, now's the time, get them in there into that chat box. If it's a complicated question, if you want to throw in there a complicated question, we'll ask you to unmute and ask that question. Just trying to avoid having everybody unmuted at once, because that ends up with kind of the feedback issue that we didn't get up with earlier.
And while we're waiting for the questions to come through, I just want to commend ASQ Lafayette, you know, as you know, this impact that our new normal as a result of this pandemic is having on a number of us. We're having to figure out different ways to stay engaged and communicate and do the work that we need to do. And so oftentimes we can't wait until things are perfect. You know, it's progress over perfection. And you're demonstrating, even with having these virtual meetings, what that PDCA cycle is about. You come up with a plan, you're doing the plan, you're checking it, and if what works with the Zoom works, you'll come up with a standard. If not, you'll look at something new. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Aaron, thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. See your comment in the chat box. Well, if no one has any questions, that's certainly fine. You may have some questions at another point in time. This last slide has my contact information, including my LinkedIn. I'm Deondra Wardelle on LinkedIn. So feel free to contact me. And Thomas, I'll stay on for anything else you need. If you want me to stop sharing my screen, let me know. I can do that as well.
You're good. And we've got a question here. What changes, if any, was made from A3 to the new A4?
Okay, good question, Scott. So the number one change that was made was the size. So it's gone from the 11 by 17 to I now believe it's an 8.5 by 11. And what the goal was is to force, coming up, just like with what Greg was saying later, a concise way to communicate the information that was learned. So just a smaller sheet of paper to be more succinct, to be more thoughtful, to get away from, sometimes I think about, when I was in high school and we had that word limit for our papers. And, some of us would pull out that thesaurus and say, what's the biggest word we can find to take up as much space? That's not how we want to do the A3 reports. Any visuals that we can put in there or bullets, not those big, long flowing paragraphs, to make sure that we can concisely communicate the information. So that's the primary change. That's just a decrease in size to make sure that, the report is as concise as possible. Thank you for that question, Scott.
Awesome. All right, well, I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'm on behalf of ASQ Lafayette. No, I'm sorry, we do have another one. When you're training for an organization, what does the ideal length of time and number of participants look like?
Okay, Greg, that's a good question. Usually when I train and work with an organization, I realize no two organizations are alike, no two audiences are alike. And so, I am a PDCA, I am sincere about it. So I even apply PDCA when I'm preparing a presentation or I do training. So it would start with me going to Gemba and understand, what's the goal, what the objective. I have done training with audiences as large as, I have a workshop coming up in a few weeks where there's 150 people in attendance. I've done them as small as 2 or 3 people. But ultimately what I have to understand, what is the goal that needs to be accomplished, and then figure out, how much time is needed to make that training happen. And then sometimes I'm given a set format that you only have like 30 minutes. And I'll try to figure out, well, what are the main objectives we want to accomplish in those 30 minutes and go from there. So it's really a case by case and even using PDCA to figure that out.
And I can confirm that she does that. We had a brief Zoom meeting a couple weeks ago, and we started working this presentation out. And she was asking all those questions about the goals and what we're trying to do. So I can confirm for her, she does go through that.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for that compliment. I really appreciate it. And thank you for helping to present, you and Vicki both, with you sharing on the slides earlier.
So when doing a training, what do you feel is the hardest part of PDCA to train?
That's a good question, Scott. The hardest part of PDCA is not so much to train, But the hardest part to get people to practice is our human nature is when there is an improvement we want to make, or if there is a problem, we want to totally skip plan, do check, and go right to act. So whether it's the training, but more so when it comes to the practice and the coaching and continuously asking questions and working with the learner to make, to get them to understand, that there are these steps and it's important for us to go through these steps. And that's why it's even more important for us to use the A3 report, because the goal is to serve as a reminder of what the next step is in that problem solving process and helps guide us through that. Most people think that the A3 report is some report you complete at the end. No, it's a tool to help to guide us with that thinking. Okay, and I see a question here from Aaron. A3 and A4 simply refer to standard paper size, correct? Yes, that's absolutely it. And I'm sorry that I didn't mention that earlier. Oftentimes there are so many acronyms, we're almost like in an alphabet soup in the continuous improvement world, and I know definitely in the quality world. But yeah, A3 and A4 just refers to the sizes of paper. The next time you go to print something out, look at the paper selection when you go to print it, and you'll see A3 is the 11 by 17, and the A4 is the the 8.5 by 11. And that's one of the things that I appreciate so about Toyota. And although some organizations, if you start talking about, well, at Toyota they do this, they really don't want to hear it. So all the time, not all the time do I mention that this is a practice of Toyota. I don't get caught up in the tools and the terminology. I just want the learning to occur. But it's about keeping things simple and concise. And again, it's about the practice in developing those learners, showing that respect for people, and improving processes. So Aaron, thank you for asking that question, because it was really important to clarify that A3 and A4 are not an acronym. They refer to the standard paper size. So you are correct. And if we were actually in person, Aaron, I would give you a high five right now for that.
Good job, Aaron. Okay. Looks like we are now out of questions. So on behalf of ASQ Lafayette, thank you for presentation. And as is our custom, we will be sending you a little gift card as a thank you for your time and efforts. We so appreciate you taking the time out of your evening. And I know that a lot of prep goes into these presentations as well. So thank you again. And to everyone online, thank you for joining us. This is actually a great turnout. In case any of you cannot see the number of participants, we've got 17 participants online, so it was a great turnout tonight. Thank you for being here, and everybody have a good evening and a wonderful upcoming holiday weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.